Serenity had an accidental death. She got injured on swings.
Tonight, the lawyer for the kinship guardians taking care of a young girl when she died says her death was a tragic accident.
I just trusted the doctors to do the right thing. I did trust the system a lot. I didn't think that they will just let him die.
The BC government says people no longer have to be sober 6 months to get a liver transplant. So why did this woman's husband die?
When that water comes in, it cools down the reactors and then it's processed and pumped out.
And living with reactors. We visit a community in Ontario that has to coexist with the Bruce nuclear power plant. Good evening, I'm Brittany Hobson. Last week we reported on 4-year-old Serenity. She died while in kinship care in Alberta in 2014. The 2 kinship guardians who were caring for her were charged with failing to provide the necessities of life in 2017. But last week, charges against the family were stayed. APTN National News talked to the lawyer representing the family, who says Serenity's death was a tragic accident, and to Serenity's mother, who still wants justice.
When Serenity was 4 years old, she was living with relatives with her 2 siblings, while her mother was dealing with domestic violence and drug issues. The family were her legal caregivers. In 2014, Serenity died in hospital with an extensive brain injury. The Alberta Child Advocates report says she was significantly underweight and had several bruises over her body. The 2 kinship guardians were charged for failing to provide the necessities of life. Last week, those charges were stayed. Serenity's mother drove from British Columbia to Edmonton to fight to get the charges reinstated or new ones implemented. APTN talked to Serenity's mother at the Alberta legislature. We cannot show her face due to a publication ban.
That's not fair. My daughter was malnourished. She was starved. She was 18 pounds when she went into the hospital. And coming from somewhere and being 18 pounds at 4.5 years old.
Lawyer Robert Lee represents the kinship guardians. He says Serenity's death is tragic, but not the fault of his clients.
Serenity had an accidental death. She got injured on swings.
What about the reports of her being malnutritioned?
There's things I can't talk about right now because there's a publication ban from the preliminary hearing. My clients are very eager to have that publication ban lifted.
Serenity's mother says she will be doing everything to get the charges reinstated. She provided APTN National News with the hospital report indicating the head injury and malnourishment.
I know that I played a part, and I'm going to have to pay for that for the rest of my life.
Robert Lee blames the Alberta child welfare system. He says if Serenity's mother had been given the proper supports, there would have been no need for his clients to have been guardians at all.
How Serenity was handled while in the care of child welfare is not an accident. It's a systemic problem that exists within our system where the rules aren't followed, proper supports aren't provided, parents aren't given the necessary supports, information is not shared, and things just aren't done properly.
Lee says Serenity's death has destroyed the lives of his clients.
My clients are very eager for the truth to come out because there have been many false allegations made against my clients. Very simple factual allegations that are just purely false. And my clients and I have been unable to clarify those false statements because of these bans, these gag orders that are on us.
I'm hoping to get the best outcome because I think that my daughter deserves justice. Not only does my daughter deserve justice, but her siblings do, and all the other Indigenous children that have, obviously been swept under the rug.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
The day school settlement overcame its last hurdle today as Federal Court Justice Michael Phelan gave the multi-billion-dollar deal final approval. Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Carolyn Bennett announced the deal back in March. It will give survivors $10,000 to $200,000 for harms associated with attending an incident of physical or sexual abuse. Payments aren't expected for several months. Day school survivor Margaret Swan attended the Bennett press conference. She's mostly happy a decade-long court battle is over.
For me, that's the biggest deal, is the acknowledgement, and it's saying, yes, this did happen and we are partially responsible. I just wish the religions, the churches that were involved with this did some things that could be more helpful for our people in the long run.
Last week, BC Transplant announced they had removed the 6-month abstinence policy for patients with liver disease. But now, a widow in Vancouver says her husband was forced to wait the 6 months and died of liver disease earlier this month. Lori Hamlin has the story.
And I was just sitting by his bedside, and because we were told...
Gagan Grewal's husband, Gaurav Chopra, died of liver disease on August 3rd. His only chance of survival was to have had a liver transplant. But he first needed to go through an assessment process, and that requires everyone to have no alcohol for a period of 6 months.
I should have fought more for him. I just trusted the doctors to do the right thing. I did trust the system a lot. I didn't think that they will just let him die.
When Gaurav was told he had end-stage liver disease in June, he had been alcohol-free since March, 3 months.
He had his liver specialist appointment on June 7th, I think. That's when the doctor said that his liver is completely gone, and then there is the 6-month period that he'll need to wait for.
The couple didn't question the abstinence policy, but that soon changed when Gaurav's health took a turn for the worse.
At that point, I honestly did not, because he was not that sick. It's only that he got worse 2-3 days before June 20th. That's when he got worse, and that's when we questioned them, and then they were still insisting that no, this is, even the nurses, and they were like, they're very strict about this policy and they won't budge. By end of July or mid-July, he got so worse that he was bleeding, and then they said they could not upweight him. Even if they bended the policy, then it was point of no return after that.
42-year-old Gaurav died in Vancouver General Hospital at the 6-month sobriety mark. His widow was shocked when she learned that BC Transplant had dropped the policy in May. The agency made the announcement in response to a human rights complaint filed by David Dennis last week. Dennis will soon die if he doesn't get a transplant, and was also told he'd have to wait out the 6-month abstinence period before assessment. But last week, in a press release, BC Transplant stated the situation was a misunderstanding and apologized for any upset. The Provincial Health Services Authority also told APTN the policy had been changed.
No, it was discussed within our team for, about since last summer, and arguments were presented, and there was much debate, and it's basically been abolished. We had dedicated meeting to this, and we have our rounds every week, and then it just kind of gradually became adopted as the functional policy. The general agreement with all the people on the team was probably at the end of May.
But Gagan says there's no misunderstanding with her husband's case.
The policy was still there. They never ever told us that, it doesn't exist. And there was not even ever a hint that this policy does not exist.
And today, on BC Transplant's website, you can find the abstinence policy in black and white. It reads, all patients being considered for a liver transplant at the Solid Organ Transplant Clinic must be abstinent from drugs and alcohol for a minimum of 6 months. The Provincial Health Services Authority told us they can't comment on Gaurav's case because of doctor-patient confidentiality. Lori Hamlin, APTN National News, Vancouver.
A public inquest into the death of Austin Eagle Chief began today in Saskatoon. 22-year-old Eagle Chief was in a vehicle being pursued by the Saskatoon Police Service in June 2017. The vehicle crashed and police found the driver was not breathing, according to the province's Justice Ministry. An officer commenced CPR until medical personnel arrived a short time later and confirmed that the driver was dead, the ministry says. Gunshots were fired by police at some point as the truck rammed a police cruiser, and an officer in the police car was taken to hospital with injuries to her neck and head. However, the chief coroner reported an autopsy indicated gunshots did not lead to Eagle Chief's death. Conservative Party leader Andrew Scheer has again asked the RCMP's top officer to investigate the Trudeau government over the SNC-Lavalin affair. SCTV's Glenn McGregor reports Scheer believes police need to take a closer look at some of the findings from a scathing report released last week by the Ethics Commissioner.
With mere weeks until the federal election campaign kicks off, Andrew Scheer is trying to keep Canadians focused on liberal ethics.
We know that Justin Trudeau has broke the law. Now we need to know if he has committed a crime.
The Conservative leader today wrote the Commissioner of the RCMP to ask that she investigate whether the Prime Minister or his officials obstructed justice in the SNC-Lavalin affair. Scheer's letter is largely symbolic. The RCMP has already said it is examining the matter.
First one's here.
And former Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould, allegedly pressured to give SNC a plea deal, said she had been contacted by the Mounties in the spring. Scheer says Ethics Commissioner Mario Dion's report last week, with its finding that Trudeau breached the conflict of interest law, gives police new leads that should be investigated.
The RCMP or any police department has to examine any allegation of a criminal offense having occurred. So when it's a leader of the opposition, it certainly gives it some credibility.
Trudeau didn't sound concerned.
The Conservatives will continue to ask questions, as is important for an official opposition. We will continue to stand up and defend jobs.
But so close to the election, even the possibility of a police probe brings back unsettling memories for his party.
We're going to win that election.
In the 2006 campaign, Paul Martin's Liberals were sideswiped by news of an RCMP investigation into allegations that someone in government leaked details of changes to the income trust laws.
The West is in now. Canada will work for all of us.
Stephen Harper's Conservatives won the election. Ultimately, no Liberal politicians were accused of any wrongdoing. The Election Commissioner's report could be affecting the timing of the election campaign. Justin Trudeau can trigger it as early as Labor Day weekend or wait until mid-September when voters' memories of the SNC-Lavalin affair have faded a little bit more. Glenn McGregor, CTV News, Ottawa.
We take a look at the relationship between one First Nation and a nearby power plant. More on that after the break. Here is Tuesday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. 25 in rain in Charlottetown, 28 in Halifax, 7 degrees in Nain, 24 and some sun in Cartwright, 26 in Saguenay, 25 in Montreal, 29 in sunny skies in Peterborough, 27 in North Bay, some rain and 21 in Wawa, rain and 22 in Thunder Bay. In northern Manitoba, lots of rain, and 16 in Norway House and God's Lake. 24 in Winnipeg and Gimli, 23 in Brandon. In Saskatchewan, sunny skies, 24 in Estevan and Swift Current. 18 in La Ronge, 15 in rain in Stony Rapids. Welcome back. We go now to a community in southwestern Ontario that's had to coexist with one of the world's largest nuclear power plants in its own territory. Annette Francis brings us part one of this story.
This team of young women are from the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation. For many people in their communities, fish is an important food staple and commodity.
We're interested to know, I guess, how the inner workings of the Bruce Power operation can either affect or play a part in the habitat structure here and what species we might find.
The Bruce Power nuclear site sits on the shores of Lake Huron, within the boundaries of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation's traditional territory. That's why they're taking part in a coastal waters monitoring program.
We just gather the water quality samples, and then we collect fish samples. We collect we ID the fish species, then we measure them just to get a baseline of the growth and the habitat that they're in.
The Saugeen Ojibwe Nation includes the Saugeen First Nation and the Chippewas and Nawash. Their traditional territory covers a large area in southwestern Ontario, and there's a long history of nuclear power here.
Douglas Point was the first nuclear power plant in the country called Canada. So it is now decommissioned, but now they have two power plants called Bruce A and Bruce B, with 4 reactors in each plant, so a total of 8 reactors.
According to Kathleen Ryan, after many years of pressure, Bruce Power has agreed to cover the costs of the monitoring program over the next 3 years. It's an opportunity for the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation to keep track of what's happening to the environment within their territory. She says for years there's been concerns of the effects on the water.
The other concerns are actually the way that the plant interacts with the environment. So it has a cooling water system that intakes around 30 billion liters of water a day into the plant, which is like the size of a large river. It sucks water into the plant every day in that volume, and with it, it brings adult fish, small fish, eggs, and that ranges anywhere from, tens of thousands a year to hundreds of thousands a year. It all depends on the year and what fish are there. When that water comes in, it cools down the reactors, and then it's processed and pumped out. So that same volume water is coming out, but it's at a different condition. It's not the same water. It's warm, it's been through the plant, it gets pumped out into the environment and changes the water temperature there. And we don't exactly know what the effects of that are.
Kurt Root is an avid fisherman. That's why he's come out to help. His catch today is not for eating. He'll pass these fish off to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission for testing. He says the monitoring program is necessary for his kids' future.
They're just kind of getting their taste for fishing now, but it's reassuring that the fish are going to be tested, so any problems or potential side effects will be identified now. So when they grow up and start learning all this information, they'll have a safe food supply and they'll be knowledgeable of what's going on. So,
Paul Jones is a commercial fisherman. He spends most of his time in the Georgian Bay area, away from Lake Huron. He says the nuclear plant has always been an issue.
Back out and they're doing that every day for 30, 40 years, there has to be an impact on it. I wouldn't see how there could not be an impact.
The monitoring program is still in the initial stages. Ryan hopes to expand the program next year to include another team of eager environmental technicians. Coming up tomorrow, I'll have part 2 on the progress with Bruce Power. Annette Francis, APTN National News, Saugeen Ojibwe Nation.
Time for another quick break, but stick around. We go to a Two-Spirit culture camp in Saskatchewan after these messages. Here's the rest of Tuesday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. Sunny in Fort McMurray with a high of 20, 23 in Grand Prairie. In Calgary, 24. In Medicine Hat and Lethbridge, 28 above. In BC, 24 with a mix of sun and cloud in Vancouver, 22 in Campbell River. Rain and 20 in Smithers, 17 in Fort Nelson. In the Yukon, a mix of sun and cloud and 16 for Dawson and Mayo. Over to the NWT, 7 above in Trout Lake, 11 in Fort Simpson, 10 in Colville Lake, 11 in Inuvik, 18 degrees in Baker Lake, 11 in sun in Chesterfield, 12 and sunny in Iqaluit, and 15 in Cape Dorset. We head now to Saskatchewan, where the 10th annual Bike-a-thon for suicide awareness took place earlier this month on the Flying Dust First Nation. The idea for the event is to get youth active and participating in activities. English River First Nation Chief Lawrence McIntyre took part in the bike-a-thon. He says it's a healthy way to get people to talk about suicide and mental health issues.
I really enjoyed. There's more people that are participating. Initially, when we started, we had about 20, and now we have 50 bikers, and plus the other support staff, and hopefully we create that awareness out there with our youth and also with our general public as well.
Up in northern Saskatchewan, the 4th annual Two-Spirit Cultural Camp took place out on the land. APTN's Priscilla Wolf went to the camp and has this story.
500 kilometers north of Saskatoon, about 40 people gathered for the Two-Spirit Cultural Camp. Out Saskatoon put on the camp. Jack Saddleback is one of the organizers and says the camp helps participants learn about the land and Indigenous culture in a positive environment.
This is a intergenerational cultural camp that's paired with some amazing knowledge keepers here up north and an identity affirming space. Yes, it is geared towards Two-Spirit people, and it is planned by and for Two-Spirit folks, but at the same time we open it up to allies of Two-Spirit people who are Indigenous or non-Indigenous.
Marjorie Boucage is one of the elders here. She says she saw a lot of youth struggling in the city and felt that helping organize something on the land and off the grid would benefit them.
This land is beautiful. It's and it's full of medicines and all kinds of good things. So it's a self-governing camp. That's the other thing. It's not a program. It's like people govern themselves while they're here and they do what they need to do.
Dora Palmer, aka Rainbow Cookum, says ceremony played an important role at this year's camp and that one powerful sweat helped her heal.
Recently, I was widowed, and in the lodge last night we had a sweat, and one of the men, they said, I need to connect with you because I was stuck in the BD mode. And he said he connected with my late husband, the spirit. And the message I got was, quit moping and get on with life because I have a big job. I have a big job to do. And I needed to hear that to carry on in what I do.
Palmer will use her gift to continue helping Two-Spirit youth with her teachings. Many of the participants traveled from Saskatoon. Organizers are hoping youth from the north will attend next year. Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, near La Planche, Saskatchewan.
A dangerously close call for a couple of kayakers exploring a glacier in Alaska. A massive ice bridge collapsed just as the two men were approaching it. The kayakers were soaked when the falling ice blocks caused a massive wave. The force of the water nearly flipped their boats, but both managed to stay afloat. Scary stuff. That's all your APTN National News for this Monday. Thanks for joining us today. Come back tomorrow to see more of the latest Indigenous news, and you can also visit our website at aptnnews.ca or download our APTN app. I'm Brittany Hobson. Have a wonderful evening.